Hello everyone, I'm Eternal Flame here, and today I'm here to talk about something that's kind of really important to Invincible, at least in my opinion, which is its power scaling and if it has an issue or not. Now, the primary issue with Invincible kind of centers around the character himself of Mark Grayson, mainly because I don't think this issue exists for as many characters as it does him, which is Mark Grayson taking damage from or even losing to characters who we expect him not to lose to. Taking characters he should be far more superior to and just be able to speed blitz, but yet he ends up taking damage from them. Now up first I'm going to go over why this actually is a problem, and then I'm going to try and answer the question on if this is a problem or not. Now the reason why I think this is a problem is because of one of the major themes that exists in Invincible, and why power scaling is kind of much more important to Invincible as a series in comparison to other series. While there are a lot of themes around Invincible, one of the general core narratives of Invincible is the fact that Mark Grayson is so far the only person physically capable of defending Earth. He is the strongest superhero they got, and he is the best option to defend against Viltrumites, which is shown again and again, such as the Guardians of the Globe, which is supposed to be the strongest superhero team behind Invincible, getting taken out by one of the variants of Invincible, didn't even go for the same training as him, or Plan B, which is an army of Reanimen being easily torn through by Season 3 Invincible. It also makes it have even more weight when people like Conquest do eventually arrive, because Mark is the only one who has a chance against them. Sure, people like Adam, Eve, and Oliver are able to offer some assistance against something like Conquest, but it's ultimately going to come down to Mark Grayson. That is what the bigger narrative has been spitting the entire time. Now, Mark Grayson is supposed to be the strongest hero, especially by Season 3. Sure, in Season 2, it might have been debatable if he was the strongest or not, but it's pretty obvious, at least in my opinion, in Season 2 he is, considering him and the Immortals discussion, but in Season 3, that point is just hammered down upon with his training and how easily he dispatched the Reanimen, the same Reanimen who we saw in the previous episode take out the person who captured all the superheroes on the planet. This theme and narrative is even more supported and reinforced during the Invincible War, where barely anybody managed to get a solo kill on Invincible, with the only 3 people who managed to beat an Invincible solo being our Invincible, Powerplex, and finally Tech Jacket. So now you might be wondering, okay, if Invincible has been doing well in showing off how strong Invincible is in comparison to the heroes, it doesn't really have a power scaling issue. It's kept the theme consistent that Invincible is the only one on Earth who can stand up to Viltrumites. After all, it's shown pretty clear that Invincible in Season 3 is leagues above everybody else in the hero side other than Adam Eve, who's the one who can barely keep up with him, and even then, Adam Eve is still quite a bit below him, with Adam Eve needing her near-death power-up in order to do some damage against Conquest. So why is this an issue? Well, this issue doesn't actually come to the heroes, it more so comes on the side of the Earth villains in specific. But despite the fact that Mark Grayson is so much stronger than all the other heroes, there are just a bunch of Earth villains that are not just able to keep up with and do damage to Invincible, but even in one case in particular, are able to even almost kill Invincible. And this has led to an entire meme spawning about how Invincible loses to every single villain shown on screen. Like the amount of times that I have seen people say that Invincible should have just speed blitzed Cecil and grabbed the remote from his hands before he could activate the sound bomb in his head again is kinda crazy. But that's just one of many examples, where there are a bunch of fights that happen, especially in Season 3 and Season 2, where Invincible loses to some people who a lot of people think he shouldn't be losing to. Now in Season 1 it was kinda acceptable in my opinion, mainly because this was a new Invincible. He was getting used to his powers and still kinda just learning everything, so him losing to lower tier people made a lot of sense. In Season 2 it was a bit less acceptable, but it was also acceptable mainly because of the fact that he was still getting used to his powers. He hadn't had it for that long, about a year at that current point in time, but he wasn't really that actively into using his powers at that point and still readjusting from the Omniman fights. But Season 3 is kind of the breaking point for a lot of people, mainly because he by this point has taken on the role as Earth's strongest hero. And yet in spite of that, Invincible is still losing to a bunch of villains that he really shouldn't be losing to up to this point. And usually the explanations, if there is any at all for how they are that strong, are kind of lackluster. Like one of the big examples of this is Doc Seismic. Through his training inside of a prison cell, as well as now having control over several creatures within the Earth itself and the Earth's core, he was able to overpower and defeat Invincible. And while it's a bit easier for me to accept that he had gotten stronger since there is any justification at all, for a lot of people that's not really the case. Especially considering he's never really established Doc Seismic has super speed, other than the fact he's capable of fighting Invincible at all. Especially considering this is a scenario where blitzing Doc Seismic would be good since Doc Seismic kidnapped every single superhero on Earth. Or Mr. Liu, who does so well against Invincible, I am still convinced up to this point that he is the strongest Earthling. Not counting Evil Herd limiters unlocked. Like, to put it into perspective, the villains within Invincible on Earth are so cracked that when I made my video about all the Invincible Earthlings not counting Mark himself against Conquest to see if they could win, not just was I able to convince people that they had a chance at winning this, I had most of the comments telling me that Earth would actually do better than I even thought. And there are plenty more examples that I can bring up of Mark losing fights that he really shouldn't be losing, but yeah, you've already heard about those in the past. And I should say this, I don't want Invincible to be the absolute strongest right now. I absolutely love that there are a bunch of things from Earth that are capable of killing him. That is not the problem here. The problem is the narrative is trying to establish repeatedly that Mark is the strongest thing Earth has and the only defense against Viltrumites is actually valid, with the second strongest defense they had being torn through by the first relatively easily when enraged, and yet we see so many things from Earth that are capable of standing a chance against Invincible, primarily on the side of the villains. And even in some cases straight up beating Invincible, like Reminder, Doc Seismic, Powerplex, and Mr. Liu all beat Invincibles. Hell, even the Muller twins beat Invincible, though that one's a lot more excusable, at least in my opinion, because they used a stun gun, which kind of just bypasses strength and it doesn't really matter how strong you are, but that's beside the point. And I know what some of you guys might be saying by this point, or have probably already commented on, which is the fact that all power scaling issues can be explained away by just saying he is holding back in every single one of his fights. Which is most definitely an issue, the fact that Mark does hold back in every single one of his fights and his power control sucks that badly, but the more important thing is it doesn't work fully as an explanation, at least for me, because of one reason and one reason alone. Holding back in power should only be affecting your actual striking strength, it shouldn't be affecting your durability. Like, Invincible is not a world like Hunter x Hunter or JJK where you use an energy system and you just lower the amount of energy or increase the amount of energy to take harder blows. No. Now, of course, there are ways to defend yourself in real life to somewhat reduce damage, but the reduction is not so massive to the point where it would actually make that massive of a difference when we're talking about how he should be taking damage and shouldn't be taking damage from. And even if Viltrumites could intentionally lower their durability, that's never really explained in the show about why holding back would do that to yourself. And it's not like I'm talking about off-guard attacks too. Off-guard attacks are going to generally do more damage in most TV shows, that I can accept, but it's more so when they're directly guarding themselves and still end up taking heavy hits from it. Like when Mark was being hurt by Powerplex's electricity despite the fact that Powerplex had only taken hits from a normal hammer up to this point from a normal human. Like at the start of the fight, Powerplex was able to hurt Mark even before he had taken any damage directly from Mark. So as much as Mark is holding back, it shouldn't be affecting his durability. Now, of course, I might actually be wrong about that, and if there was anything in the comics at all that proves that Mark holding back does affect his durability, please let me know. Like, I actually do want to know about this because that might be a good explanation. Now, there is a second explanation that I have seen recently that could explain the durability thing, except it doesn't really work that well for me at least, which that explanation is pretty simple. Viltrumites are less durable than they are powerful. The reason why that explanation doesn't work that well for me is because if that was the case, Conquest should be breaking Invincible's bones with each of his hits. After all, he is physically more powerful than Invincible. Even when Conquest is not taking Invincible seriously, he is absolutely dominating him, and yet he is not breaking his bones until later in the fight. So while that would be a good explanation, unfortunately the Conquest fight and just most Viltrumite fights in general kind of just go against that one. And then there's the third explanation, which has problems within the consistency, which is just a bunch of the Invincible Earthling villains just scale to Invincible. It's the most obvious explanation and the easiest one to deal with. After all, you don't have to jump through hoops, you can just go with what we see directly. And like, this only affects a couple Earthling villains as well, such as Doc Seismic, who we established that Doc Seismic had gotten stronger because he had trained, Powerplex, who was using power amplifiers, even though I find it weird that after a week of training, because he literally just put that on like a week ago, that he became this powerful, but at the same time I can somewhat accept it. And of course the final one is Mr. Liu, who was able to nearly kill Mark. However, that has problems that I mentioned earlier on in the video, where a pretty massive theme of the narrative for Season 3 especially is the entire theme and narrative that Invincible is the only one capable of taking on and fighting against the Viltrumite threats that are coming to Earth. So no matter which way you go, in my opinion, you have a problem. You either have to deal with contradictions to the actual power set and how Viltrumite powers work, or you have to deal with contradictions to one of the narrative points and themes the story is going for. Now, is this narrative a problem? And in my opinion, and this is kind of the funny part, at least for me, no, it is not really a problem in my opinion. Or at least it's not so massive a problem that it ruins the story. Now, of course, it's going to make some fights seem a little bit ridiculous to me, because there are some fights I'm going to look at and think that Invincible should not be losing or even taking damage to this person, but I can kind of just accept in my head by this point that they just scaled to Invincible, and that's just the easiest explanation, at least for me. But I know it's not really the case for some other people. So while I do think this is a minor problem, ultimately I don't think it's a massive problem that ruins the narrative, at least for me. Mainly because this problem stems from one thing about Invincible that I'm not really surprised about, because it also kind of exists in most comics, which is the fact that they just want to do really cool fights, and they don't really care that much about that power scaling aspect of the narrative. Now, as much as I think it's a huge thing, and it's kind of bad that they don't care as much as they should about it, it isn't too bad, at least in my head, since it does lead into some interesting dynamics between some characters, or just interesting fights. And most of all, it leads into some fun discussion from the fan base and just fun discussion that we guys can have. Like, I absolutely love making my entire discussion on what like strategies the Earth could do in order to take out Conquest or how to upgrade the GDA without Mark. And it was just a really fun experience, at least for me. Like, it's a problem, but it's not one that ultimately breaks the story. It's just a minor problem for me, but it's one I wanted to talk about. Now, I think the explanation I'll stick with is a bunch of characters just scaled to Mark, but I'm curious to see what you guys' explanation is in the comment section down below. Anyways, I'll see you all around. Have a good day.